You felt it this morning. That heaviness behind your eyes, the scratch at the back of your throat, your body telling you something is wrong before your brain fully understood it. And your first instinct was probably to reach for something, a pill, a drink, a phone, to search your symptoms. But here's the thing. That instinct to do something when you are sick is not modern. It is ancient. It may be the oldest human behavior there is. And what your ancestors actually did when illness hit them will completely change how you think about medicine, community, and what it even means to heal. For most of human history, getting sick was a death sentence waiting to be handed down. There were no hospitals, no antibiotics, no germ theory, no understanding of viruses. And yet, people survived, communities endured, and somewhere along the way, your ancestors developed systems for dealing with illness that were far more sophisticated than we ever gave them credit for. Some of those systems were wrong, some of them were eerily right, and some of them are still living inside your body today. Let's go back about 300,000 years. You are a member of a small band of Homo sapiens. Maybe 30 people, living somewhere in what is now Eastern Africa. There is no village yet, no permanent structure. You move constantly, following animals and fruit. And then one morning, someone in your group stops moving. Their forehead is hot to the touch. They are shivering despite the heat. They cannot walk. What happens next? The answer, based on decades of research from paleoanthropologist Rachel Caspary and others studying ancient skeletal remains, is that the group slows down. Someone stays behind with the sick person. Food is brought to them. Water is found and carried. This is not a small thing. In a world where movement meant survival, choosing to stay still for a sick member of your group was a radical act of collective investment, and the bones prove it happened. Archaeologists have found ancient skeletal remains of individuals who survived serious fractures, degenerative diseases, and infections that would have required months of immobility and constant care. They did not survive alone. Someone fed them. Someone protected them. Recovery, at its most fundamental level, was a social event. Think about that. Before there was medicine, there was care. And that care was the medicine. But humans are problem solvers. Sitting with a sick person and hoping for the best was never enough. Your ancestors wanted to do something, and so they turned to the world around them, the forest, the riverbank, the soil. They turned to plants. The use of medicinal plants by early humans is one of the most remarkable and underappreciated chapters in human history. Researcher Daniel Moorman, who spent decades cataloging indigenous medicinal plant use across cultures, documented over 27,000 plant-based remedies used by Native American peoples alone. And many of these plants contain compounds we now know to have genuine pharmacological effects. Willow bark, used by ancient Egyptians and documented in the Ebers Papyrus dating to 1550 BCE, contains salicin, the compound that eventually became aspirin. Certain molds on bread were applied to infected wounds in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Serbia long before Alexander Fleming isolated penicillin in 1928. Your ancestors were doing empirical medicine. They just did not have a word for it. They learned by watching, by trying, by failing and trying again. If a plant caused vomiting, they noted it and used it when someone needed to purge a toxin. If a root reduced swelling, they remembered it and returned to it season after season. This was not superstition dressed up as medicine. It was systematic observation accumulated over thousands of years, passed down through stories, rituals, and the careful instruction of the young. The reason you know that chamomile is calming and ginger settles a stomach is because someone thousands of years ago paid very close attention to what happened after drinking the wrong or right thing. But not everything your ancestors did when sick was pharmacologically sound. And here is where it gets stranger. Alongside plant medicine, ancient humans developed something else entirely: ritual. The idea that illness was not just a physical event, but a spiritual one. That sickness meant something beyond the body. In nearly every culture ever studied, anthropologist Weston LeBar noted that the role of the healer was inseparable from the role of the spiritual intermediary. The shaman, the medicine man, the witch doctor, these figures did not choose between treating the body and treating the spirit. They treated both at once, because in their worldview, both were always involved. And before you dismiss this as primitive thinking, consider what we now know about the placebo effect, about the relationship between stress and immune function, about the documented power of social support in recovery outcomes. A 2010 study published in Cancer by researcher Julianne Holt-Lundstad found that social isolation increases the risk of early death by roughly 26%, a figure comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Your immune system does not work in a sealed chamber. It listens to your nervous system. It responds to how safe you feel, how connected you feel, how much your community signals that you matter. When a shaman performed a healing ritual over a sick person, surrounded by the rest of the group lit by firelight, speaking words that the sick person had been taught since childhood to associate with protection and resolution, something real was happening. Not magic, biology, the nervous system downshifting from threat mode, the immune system getting more resources, the body redirecting energy toward repair. Your ancestors stumbled onto something we are still rediscovering. There is also the matter of food. When ancient humans got sick, they changed what they ate. Across indigenous cultures studied by medical anthropologist Nina Etkin, a consistent pattern emerges. Sick individuals are fed broths, soft foods, specific herbs, and restricted from others. They are given smaller amounts more frequently. They are kept warm and given water, which sounds obvious until you realize that oral rehydration is still considered one of the most life-saving medical interventions in the developing world today. The instinct to feed a sick person something simple, warm, and liquid is not a cultural quirk. It is a convergent discovery made independently by virtually every human society that has ever existed. Your grandmother's chicken soup is Paleolithic medicine with better seasoning. What ancient humans could not do is equally important. They could not stop the microbes. They did not know microbes existed. And so, epidemic disease, when it came, was catastrophic. A community of 30 people had some natural immunity variability, which meant that any given illness would not kill everyone. But as humans started forming larger settlements, beginning roughly 12,000 years ago with the agricultural revolution, the density changed everything. Animals were brought in close. Human waste accumulated near water supplies. People who had never been exposed to each other's pathogens were suddenly living side by side. The diseases that devastated indigenous populations when Europeans arrived in the Americas were not weapons deliberately deployed in most cases. They were the biological consequence of one population having spent 10,000 years living with domesticated animals and another not having done so. Immunity, it turns out, is something you inherit from everyone who suffered before you, and this is the part that should stop you for a moment. Every time your immune system identifies a pathogen and defeats it, it writes a memory, a blueprint, a record. Your body becomes a library of every illness your ancestors survived. The reason you can recover from a cold that might have been fatal to a human 100,000 years ago is not because you are fundamentally stronger. It is because you are the descendant of everyone who survived it. Your immune system is an archive of ancient suffering, of someone thousands of years ago burning with fever in the dark while someone else stayed beside them with food and water and whatever they could find that helped. That person survived. They had children. Those children survived other things. And eventually, through an unbroken chain of recovery and care and improvised medicine and sheer human stubbornness, you arrived here, noticing the scratch at the back of your throat, reaching for something that helps. You are not doing something new when you try to heal. You are doing the oldest thing humans have ever done. And the most essential thing they ever figured out was not the right plant or the right ritual or even the right food. It was this: you do not do it alone. You never did. From the very beginning, the most powerful medicine your ancestors had was each other. The scratch is still there, but now you know what it means.